Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the Theater Enthusiast podcast. Today we have wig, hair, makeup designer extraordinaire. May or may not have done the hair, wig, makeup design for the newly minted Best Musical, Kimberly Akimbo, along with like four other Tonys. Not too shabby, right? They're nodding, they know, you know. Please welcome Jared Janas. Yeah, woo! I used to have an app that did applause, but nobody could hear it. And now it's just me awkwardly applauding and wooing on
Well,
Zoom.
thank you so much. It's really great to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on. Honestly, like having done a little bit of my research on you, I'm very excited to talk to you because even as like literally just before we hit record, I was like, how I learned to drive. I can't wait to ask you about the wrist tattoos. Um, but I also like as a fan of theater, I love props and I love costumes. And what's really great about the design of a show is also hair, wig, and makeup. And I can't wait to talk to you more about it because having done the research and like I don't want to say stalking your Instagram because looking at people's Instagram is actually research. So I
Sure.
yeah,
Well, I
so
mean, we put it out there so people could look at it,
yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, I don't remember specifically what the Instagram post was, but you were talking about like what type of makeup and like color that you use specifically for something, which I thought was really
mhm.
interesting because there's so much that goes into it that people don't really know about. But we will definitely get into that. So I always start with
Okay.
asking, where are you from?
Well, I'm born and raised in Chicago,
Hmm.
and I've been in New York now for 27 years, so
Wow.
longer in New York than in Chicago for sure.
Yeah, my younger sister just moved
And then
from,
are you?
yeah, I'm in New York. I'm in New
Oh
York.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Long
Okay. Oh
Island,
great.
live in Manhattan for bloop bloop years since college. So yeah.
Oh come on, if I could say 27 years, you could. It's
Well,
okay.
I'm trying to math in my head, maybe 18 years, going on 18 years in Manhattan. Just I just
All
aged
right.
myself. You're welcome. So no, I was saying my sister just moved back she went to school in Chicago, now she's back and I think she really misses Chicago because she's not used to like the apartment living in New York, how it's very different
Sure.
from what she had in Chicago. But
Oh my gosh, yes. Where did she go to school?
she went to Northwestern.
Oh, I went to the University of Chicago,
Oh, look at that. Well, if you know
opposite ends of the.
yeah, if you know anybody in like journalism, let me know.
You got it.
That's what her major was. So what got you into doing the hair, makeup, and wig stuff?
Yes, my origin story for this is really different from a lot of people's. I actually went to school for mathematics, and I actually became a mathematician first.
Oh, wow.
And I did that for 11 full years as a full time. But at the end of school, I was complaining to a friend that I had nothing to do for the last month. I was just waiting to graduate. And she said, well, why don't you come help out at the theater at the University of Chicago? It was a student run theater. And I said, all right, I'll show up. So the next day I showed up and she literally said, we need help in hair and makeup. And I smiled and I said, okay, whatever you like. And when I walked into the hair room, the guy who was designing the hair and makeup for that show, which was Assassins,
Hmm.
uh, today is a physicist. So you had a
Oh, wow.
physicist and a mathematician designing the hair and makeup for a show.
That's fine. Do you
So
think,
I always say that's the start of a bad joke.
yeah, but do you think, I mean, I don't know if this is anything, but your mathematician mathematics help with the design and, how much goes into something or anything like that?
It helped in so many ways because the first part of it is that I, as a mathematician, I was working in business, 9 to 5, kind of Monday to Friday job in business. So when it came time to opening my own wig studio, the business side of it, I already had that down. Like I've worked in fairly large business, granted the business of education for 11 years. So that helped with the business side. But more importantly, I'm very in tune with what I like to call balance, which is sort of a sort of a mathematical balance between like how big the hair should be against how big the shoulders and that's dependent upon the decade, so it's like and I have a very good memory for decades and for looks and so when you're with a mathematical mind analyzing something creative, it kind of helps you create something within some form of a balance, which I really like.
Yeah. So you got really into doing like the hair and makeup stuff when you were doing Assassins, were you like, this is cool, maybe I should continue with this? Or like, how did it just turn into from mathematics to being a fabulous hair wig makeup designer?
Well, first, thank you for that.
Sure.
3 weeks
I've seen your
after I
things.
was
I know
in,
what's going on. I've seen your work. I know what's up.
um, 3 weeks after I started hair and makeup on Assassins, we ended the run. It was only, 3 weekends. It's school, right?
Yeah.
And I called my mother 1 week before graduation, and my words were, "Oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. I know what I want to do now." And it took me only those 3 weeks, So while everyone says, I I learned what I wanted to do in college. Well, so did I, except it was those last 3 weeks, and it was really just happenstance that it occurred. And I'm thrilled that I got that quick exposure, and I just went whole hog into it after that. I did have to get a job because I was graduating and needed to support myself, so I did become a mathematician. But the first job I did was actually I was a teacher, so I only taught um, from 7:45 to 2:45, I think were my hours, something like that.
Mhm.
And then I had to grade papers and lesson plan, but then I had my evenings free and my weekends free. And so I started apprenticing everywhere that I could, evenings and weekends.
Mhm.
And that's really where my education came from. Because, after school, I just finished 20 years of school at that point. I was
Yeah.
not going back to school right away, So I wound up apprenticing, which is a really great, it's a great form of grad school on its own. So, and that's sort of how it happened. But it took me 11 years of working full time as a mathematician and part time in hair and makeup to be able to switch that balance. And actually, in 2005, I switched completely and just left mathematics behind.
Yeah.
And I've been working in wigs, hair, and makeup since 2005, full time.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2005 when you like fully transitioned into hair, wig, and makeup. Are you still in Chicago? Did you move into New York? I'm not mathing. I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not going to do math right now. 2023 minus 7, 26.
Very
Well, maybe 2008. I'm going to see. I kind of did math. I don't know if it's correct,
okay.
but no.
Okay.
See,
What year?
I'm guessing. Well, no. So,
Okay, I moved in '96.
okay, great. See, I'm already like math in my head. So you moved in 96. So were you in New York teaching and apprenticing, or did you just like, okay.
Sorry. So when I was in New York,
Mhm.
I was no longer a teacher. I was working for a company, and they were headquartered here. They moved me from Chicago to New York
Mhm.
um, to lead this department of mathematicians. And while I was there, I had no connections to New York theater like I sort of started to get in Chicago from '94
Mhm.
to '96.
Yeah.
So, and one thing New York does not have, by the way, is community theater. Unlike other cities that have community theater, we
Mhm.
really have almost none. So it's
Yeah.
not like I could just go volunteer places.
Mhm.
But eventually what I wound up doing is, I started putting myself out there, getting like the off Broadway gigs that paid like $50 or $100,
Mhm. Yeah.
slowly started working my way through that system. But then more importantly, I did also apprentice here. I apprenticed at a men's hair replacement place that no longer exists. So basically toupees,
Yeah.
building toupees and fitting toupees and all that stuff. I did that. Um, but eventually in 2005, like we're talking about, I just decided I'd had enough of the one career. It was ready for me. I was ready to switch. And so I found out that I applied to the Santa Fe Opera, which is just a summer opera program. So it's June, July, and August in Santa Fe in the hair and makeup department. And the wig master of that opera is a guy named Tom Watson, hired me as one of his assistants. And Tom Watson was also the wig master of the Metropolitan Opera and the wig designer of Wicked.
Mm.
And so I went to Santa Fe with him, and about 2 months after I started there, it was just, again, this is the end of July, so I've been there 2 months, and he pulled me outside and asked me what I was doing when I went back to New York, and I said, well, I was going to go back to my math job because I was on a leave of absence from it, sort of like a sabbatical. And he said, I want you to come back and run my studio, and I said, I'll see you there. And he even said, let's talk about the salary. I said, don't care. I'll see you there. We'll figure that out later. It's totally fine. It's like, this is the moment. This was the deciding moment. And it was either I was going to take that leap or not. And
Yeah.
so I went back home. I gave the math company a 3 week notice. And the next thing you know, I showed up on Tom Watson's doorstep, and I worked for him for the next 9 years.
Oh, wow. So you were at Wicked for 9 years, or
No, I was at Tom Watson's wig studio.
okay.
So Tom Watson, is a very big wig maker, a wig designer here in New York, and he
Mhm,
worked at the Metropolitan Opera Monday through Friday.
mhm.
Um, but he had a wig studio for all of his Broadway shows.
Wow.
And eventually I became the studio manager for that wig studio that did all the Broadway and off Broadway and regional shows. And then, and I was his associate on a few shows as well. But after 1 year of working with him, so 2005 to 2006, he actually asked me to be his, what they call the wig coordinator for Wicked, which basically is the person who sort of is like the stand-in, the de facto designer when the designer is not able to see the show.
Mhm.
And also, I'm the person who coordinates all the wigs for Wicked all around the world. So
Oh,
I
wow.
set up all the foreign productions of Wicked, which was, I mean, amazing. They sent me to all these different continents, which was fantastic. I did that while I was also running his wig studio.
Oh, wow.
And in 2014, he and I had a heart to heart and realized that it was time for me to leave his studio because I was getting my own Broadway designs and time to open my own studio. So in 2014, I opened my own studio, and that's where I've been ever since.
Yeah, backstage artistry, correct? Or no?
Correct. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I want to make sure
Yeah.
I got the
Yeah.
titles.
Correct.
So,
No, you got that right. Yeah.
yeah, so how do, because you've done so much, just to like, aside from Kimberly Akimbo, you also have Sweeney Todd currently running on Broadway, which I saw and I really enjoyed it. I also think like Annalie Ashford
Oh,
was
cool.
incredible. You also did
Hmm.
Ohio State Murders. See, this is now where I'm reading off of your resume. Good Night Oscar, which
Hmm.
total Tony deserved by Sean Hayes. Uh,
Absolutely. Oh my God. Absolutely.
yeah, I unfortunately didn't see the other performances, but I'm like, Sean Hayes, give him the Tony. And
Yep.
Juliet, How I Learned to Drive, Top Dog, Underdog, which you were the makeup consultant for, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Jag a Little Pill, you also have Frankie and Johnny and the Claire DeLu. My
Mm.
other question for you is, are you only ever allowed to work on Audra McDonald shows? Because clearly she only likes working with you based on Gershwin's Porgy and Bess. What is it? Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill, Frankie and
Hmm.
Johnny, Ohio State Murders.
No,
So do you only work with Audra? Is she only like, I just want Jared?
no, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think she's been incredibly generous to me
Mhm.
over the years. Having worked with her now on I think 5 shows or something like that. But I'd also worked with her when Tom Watson designed a few shows for her back in the early two like the like 2010 time frame. I was like an associate on a couple of his shows with her. But she's just been incredibly generous to me. And like not that she uses me exclusively. She has an entire wonderful team of people that she likes to work with, and she's very open to working with new people as well.
Yeah.
So I just feel so blessed that she have her on my side. She was even really generous during the pandemic when nobody was working in theater. She had she was going into the Gilded Age,
Yeah.
the TV show, and she told them, "Hey, why don't you ask Janas to build my wig for me?" And they did, and it was so generous of her in a time when none of us were making money,
Yeah.
to include me in that. I was really blown away. So, but
Yeah.
no, I mean, she will use other people as well, and I feel lucky. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah.
um,
So, you talked
uh,
about you were getting your own jobs as well. So, how does one go about pursuing getting jobs within theater, film, and television if they're hair, wig, and makeup designers, or even a wig consultant, makeup consultant, etc.?
I think when you're starting out, it's the most difficult thing, right? And one of the best ways to start out is actually, which is how I did it as well. When I was really getting the gigs, not the off Broadway, but I mean like
Yeah.
off Broadway and regional before you get to Broadway. Because I was Tom Watson's associate.
Hmm.
When Tom Watson gets a show with a Broadway costume designer, that
Hmm.
costume designer also has associates. So one associate to another associate, we started talking more and more. And
Hmm.
eventually that associate gets a show and they want someone to design their show, wig and hair wig, hair and makeup. And then they asked me to design a show as well. So like, and then as each of us starts moving up the ladder, so to say, you know, um, they start bringing us onto more shows, and it's pretty great actually. It's a wonderful system to work in because this way it sort of ensures that you get a lot of experience before you jump right into Broadway, because, Broadway the stakes are really high. So it gives you a lot of experience before you get to that point. Now, there are certainly other ways. Some people have done it other ways, but that's just the way that I did it.
Mhm.
And I feel really lucky to have had so many wonderful mentors along the way. Most importantly, I keep mentioning his name, Tom Watson, because,
Yeah.
he really did give me
Mhm.
the biggest graduate school that I could
Yeah.
have, the most important graduate school programming that I could ever have had.
Yeah. So let's talk about what goes into designing a wig or makeup, et cetera, when it comes to doing a show or a film production. Um,
Mhm.
how does that work? Who do you meet with? Who do you discuss possible designs, what they're looking for, what you have in mind, et cetera?
From the first moment that I am asked to do the show,
Mhm.
that's usually by the costume designer, by the way.
Okay.
Um, and then from that point on, I start, the process begins. And first thing I do is I read a script without any input from anyone else. I just want to see the script and see what is it that immediately hits my head. I'm looking for, what's the time period? How many days, weeks, years is this script spanning? Um, what are the socioeconomic details of each of the characters? What's the health issues of the characters? So forth, and then you also think, is this character with it? Are they sort of behind the times? Blah blah blah. I'm thinking about so many things when I'm looking at the script. Also, as far as makeup goes, is it? Are there any special effects? Do there have to be tattoos? Anything like? Do we have to make sure there are no tattoos? Cover them up on people if they have them. So I'm thinking about all of that. And then eventually, once I'm done with that and I've made all my notes, I ask to meet with the costume designer again. And we go through the script. First, they tell me what is it they're thinking of. And then I go through the script with them and all the notes that I've made. And I start asking them questions about the script and what they're thinking in those cases. So now at this point, we've gone from my ideas to our ideas, right? So now the collaboration truly begins. And once we've sort of come to a place together, what we're understanding where we are on each other's journeys, we then start to bring in like the director as well, who has already had conversations with the costume designer, but now it's time for me to chat with them as well. So I start to understand more. And then things just sort of go slowly until the casting is ready. And once the cast is in place, that adds a new layer because the cast definitely should have some input on how they're going to look on stage. Now, granted, they can't have all the input because they're seeing themselves in a mirror. We're seeing themselves against everybody else on that stage, right? So we have to balance everybody together. And that's where collaboration, but editing takes place. Like we're all collaborating, but then we're editing out some ideas.
Yeah.
And so that's really how the process goes. And then after all that's done, then we build our wigs, fit our wigs. And from that point, then things really start to change.
Yeah.
You realize, oh, that's the wrong color. Oh, that's too much. Oh, that's too little. And that's really how the process goes.
Yeah. Can you
And then when we
talk?
get to tech, it's totally different again. So
Yeah. Can you talk about the process of fitting a wig? Like I know how it's done, but for those listening might not know how one fits a wig to a performer's head.
sure. Yeah. When they first come to us, and then we decide that they're going to wear a wig,
Mhm.
the first thing we need to do is get a mold of their head so we can build a wig specifically to the shape of their head and their exact hairline. So we do this, we prep their hair to get it as flat as possible. And then we put basically a plastic bag and a bunch of tape over their head, so that we can get an exact duplicate of their own head. And then we're drawing on that plastic bag. We're drawing their entire hairline, even the minor details of like, oh, this is where the part is. These are sort of finer hairs in the front. It's fuller here. Here's where the cowlick is, and so forth. We're drawing all these details. We're taking a series of measurements. And once we pull that off the head, we have a nice duplicate of their head. But of course, it's now a malleable piece of plastic. So we have to put that onto a canvas head that we call a block. We put that on there, and then we stuff that out with like kind of pillow stuffing. We fill that thing out until it reaches those exact measurements. Once we've got that on there, we literally have a duplicate of their head right next to us. So now anything we build on that block will be perfect for them.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. We start to build it, and then our fittings will, occasionally we're off on something here and there, a measurement or we've overstuffed the block accidentally, so we can make all these adjustments later, but that's how the process goes.
Yeah. Because sometimes people have the mics in their wig cap. Do you have to also take that
Mhm.
into consideration when you're making wigs for certain people?
Yes, I actually have a bunch of 3D printed mic packs of different sizes.
Oh, wow.
So I just find out from the sound designer which size mic packs they're going to be using, and if the mics are going to go into the wigs, which I'm putting this out there, I actually hate when that happens because that means we have to design the wigs around or design the hair around a mic pack, which is interesting. But anyway, thankfully the mic packs are smaller these days, much smaller. They
Yeah.
disappear nicely. But then we do put the different sizes on their blocks when we're actually building the foundation. So we know it'll fit perfectly.
Yeah. And what about makeup design? I say this because I think like the last thing you posted also was like Ruthie Ann Miles as the beggar woman, and you're like, she wanted to go for
Yes.
it, and we did. So when it comes
Yes.
to makeup design, I know that you said that they do have some collaborations, some not. So I guess maybe more so like if you have something like Sweeney Todd versus something that's more modern day, like Top Dog Underdog, or like How I Learned to Drive, even though that doesn't take place now, it takes place a couple years back. But what's the difference with designing the makeup and the hair and all that stuff for those types of shows? Or and even and Juliet, which is kind of a combination of like modern Shakespeare.
Hmm. So makeup design is so unique to each show.
Mhm.
Um, and let me give some examples. Let me start with Sweeney Todd because that's a
Yeah.
great example to
Mhm.
to illustrate with. When So with Sweeney Todd, we always know it's a period piece,
Mhm.
right? Um, I talked with I knew from the costume designer and the director exactly what sort of periods they were going for. It was a little bit of a mishmash of a few periods, but still, obviously very much, let's just call it 1800s.
Mhm.
And so we know in the 1800s, we don't have the same modern day products that they had back then. The products are just totally different. There's a lot of plant-based material back then, berries that you could use. And so what we wanted to do was figure out how, for the people who were going to wear makeup, like there were a few people who wanted to actually wear makeup, like they actually put something on. We had to figure out where did that makeup come from, and really, what we decided was it had to be things that were in your house already. Like if you had strawberries or blackberries in your house, or raspberries, maybe you put that on your cheek and a little bit on your lip, right? You
Yeah.
know, uh, and then if you need, if there was going to be a little dirt on your face, it would have probably come from the wood burning stove or whatever you had, the soot.
Mhm.
So we started with that, but then we also knew that most of the people in this company were going to be considered like lower class.
Mhm.
Um, and those who were not going to be considered lower class, we're calling them upper class, but there were no it wasn't really upper class. It was just not quite down and out, is what we're kind of meant by that. And so because I didn't know which character was going to be which at the beginning, when I met everybody for their wig wrap, for that head wrap I was doing, I took a photo of them face forward and then put that on my iPad. And then I started drawing two makeups for everybody, the quote unquote upper class and the lower class, or the down and out look. So I
Mhm.
had both looks for them. And then when I met with them again with the actual wigs,
Mhm.
I had a chance to go through those sketches that I did to say, listen, here's what I've come up with. But of course, now we have to start the collaborative part. So I said, this is what I've come up with. I have two looks here. Don't know which one you're going to be. And then they were able to tell me right then what their character was, because they were sort of developing their characters in the beginning of rehearsal, right? So for example, Delaney Westfall, um, decided that her character was going to be the prostitute of the town, and so when you get a piece of information like that, that makes all the difference in the world, because prostitutes in the 1800s were like the most made up, the perfect hair, there was an advertising happening basically. And
Yeah.
so I knew to scrap that sort of down and out look, and
Mhm.
we went for the made up look, and that helped me then when I came to decide. Mac Cosmetics gave us a great sponsorship for the show, and that helped me to figure out which products I needed to order for each person.
Mhm.
So we knew if you were down and out, you're getting these colors. If you're not down and out, you're getting these colors. Kind of going in that world. But you mentioned Ruthie Ann.
Yeah.
So Ruthie Ann, when I met with her, she said, I'm giving away some secrets here, but I think that's okay.
Well, and spoiler.
She
Okay,
said,
go ahead.
she really wanted to, yeah,
Yeah.
she really, really wanted to go there. So much so that she even said, I even kind of want to smell bad. And I was like, well, I think we're going to have to draw a line at that one because you've got a whole bunch of
Yeah.
cast members around you who have to be considered. But, certainly when you look at her, because she wanted to go there so much, when you look at her, you kind of believe that she probably does smell bad, which is great. So the other company members could act around that, which was, and respond to that. But Ruthie also wanted to make sure that her teeth looked bad. But, when we told her about the process of doing that, it's not a problem. It's just that it's so much, she has lovely teeth, and, I can understand why people might be concerned that the makeup might stain, even though it doesn't. Fortunately, she had just had Invisalign, and she brought Invisalign with her to us, and we painted her Invisalign and threw that in her mouth. And so that's how her teeth get kind of gross is. We just grossed out those Invisalign. It was perfect.
Worked out well.
So she
Yeah.
really, really wanted to go there, and I loved it. I loved every minute of that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember, was there a glow up with Mrs. Lovett from Act 1 to Act 2?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk
Yeah,
about,
she gets.
yeah, please go ahead.
Sure, yeah, sure. So Act 1, both hair and makeup change from Act 1 to Act 2. In Act 1, it is a more subdued look with the makeup, and excuse me, and also with the hair, it is very much messy, utilitarian. Get it out of my way, get it up, And Anna Lee, when we talked, wanted to go. She wanted to do a bit of an homage to two very famous Mrs. Lovetts with her entire look. It was sort of part Angela Lansbury, part Helena Bonham Carter. And she was also sort of specific about the hair. She said she wanted to have the hair, the texture of Bernadette Peters brushed out. And I was like, oh, so you know exactly what that looks like. But then I was like, so how can I make this happen? So I was able to design a wig around that. And then when we were talking about the makeup, the other thing about Anna Lee that's very important to know is that she is celiac. So we needed to go gluten-free with her makeup. So one of the things I did is I researched online which MAC products were gluten-free. The most important part being the lipstick, because you don't want her to eat lipstick that has gluten in it, because you're more likely to eat your lipstick, right? So, so we looked for that. We had to go outside of MAC for that specifically as well. But still, but the makeup for Act 1 was much more subdued, and by Act 2, she really wants to. It's not tarting up. It is more like it's Mrs. Lovett's idea of what an exciting evening out would look like, right? Remembering that her taste level is different from other people's, and her ideas of upper class would be very different from other people's. And so, some of the colors are a little bit too dark in Act 2, which is great, around the eyes, a little bit around the lip and stuff. So maybe she's using more blackberry instead of, let's say, raspberry, you know what I mean? Like it's a little too dark. She's definitely using the soot from around her stove to align her eyes, and so she does have quite a bit of a transformation, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that. No, I shouldn't say that. You definitely see the transition. You more see it in the hair, of course, because it's a massively different hair look for Act 2. So,
yeah, I saw it a couple of months ago, so I was just trying to remember what the quote unquote glow up was.
yes.
But so for Kimberly Akimbo, that's especially for the character of Kimberly, because she's a 16-year-old in a 70-year-old woman's body. So, Victoria Clark is still a young 25 to me. But how is designing Kimberly's look specifically?
So the way to design a modern show is just different. All of us are very different, right? The way we design it. But with that show, we started off Broadway. So the process was actually very different. Not only did we not have a sponsorship for the show, which was okay. In fact, we still don't. We didn't seek one out. We were really looking for sort of clean looks in general, because this was a poorer family, and they're running from like city to city. They're sort of escaping their past, so to say. And it's not like they remembered to stop at the CVS to pick up the makeup and all that stuff. So they're using very minimal stuff. But, in the script, there's a specific line for Kimberly where the father looks over to her in the car and says, "Are you wearing makeup? I don't like it." He's realizing his daughter is growing older. So we had to show some makeup change there. And so we started with Vicky with a very clean look. And when I say clean look, that doesn't mean no makeup. It means the no makeup look. It's putting on makeup to make it look like you're not really wearing anything.
Yeah.
And
is
that's
like
actually a little bit more difficult
everyday,
than
so
people
I get
think.
it. Yeah. Sorry, I was talking
Right.
over.
Sometimes it's no, please. I heard what you said though, but absolutely. It's like, it is like a day look for people, right? It's the thing that makes them what makes some people feel they makes them look healthy and alive outside, whatever that means to them. So really we just wanted that no makeup look. And then we had to add something so the dad would say, are you wearing makeup? And that something is the quickest thing you can add is a lip. So we added a quick lip and out she went into do her show, But the thing is this, and I don't want to give away the spoiler of that show. For anyone who's not seen it, there's a big uh-oh scene in Act 2. And so I just want to say, to prepare for that, it meant that we couldn't do big, fancy, pretty makeup for the entire show because of what's about to happen in Act 2. And in that moment, when she comes back out and the entire audience goes, they gasp, like we know that we've done our job right when that happens.
Yeah.
But then you were also talking about so Top Dog Underdog, for example, Top Dog Underdog, I was specifically hired because one of the characters, Lincoln, has to start out in whiteface.
Yeah.
Because he, plays like Abraham Lincoln on the street corner. And so we had to do a bunch of different tests to see which products not only were opaque enough, but also could come off quickly enough on stage using whatever was available on stage, and then we had to figure out what was it that had to be available. So the reason I was actually hired for that was to figure out that whole first scene and what makeup we could use, how to get it off, how much scrubbing he was going to have to do, and then what products do I have to give him for after the show so that his face feels nice and smooth again because he's using a washcloth to take it off, and so that's why I was hired for that. But I know you also mentioned you wanted to talk about how I learned to drive.
Yeah.
And
for those
tattoos are a big part
of
my job.
Yeah. So because the amount of times I've seen the show, I noticed that Mary Louise Parker's character had tattoos on her wrist. And I feel like one of them was Lucy from the Peanuts. Yeah, that's how close I was to the stage when I saw the show.
Yes, you were. You were very close.
And notice just every little detail. But the thing is too, is because she ends up putting on a flannel shirt for a majority of the show. So you don't see the tattoos the whole time. So I'm curious to know whose idea was the tattoos and what tattoos were decided upon.
Gotcha. It is, I understand that traditionally, you wouldn't think of tattoos in that show. And I'm so happy that you noticed that there was a Lucy tattoo. That is exactly right. There was another sort of a tribal one on her other wrist. And then there was one, I don't know if you could see this one because she has long hair, but in the back of her neck, she had a tattoo as well.
No, I didn't.
That was actually quite beautiful.
Her hair down the whole time. I only noticed the wrist tattoos because, again, knowing the show and having, directed it many years ago, I just thought it was an interesting character choice as well. So that was another thing I was always like, I hope one day I find out about the tattoos, and I don't know if I ever will. And here I am, however, a year plus later, talking to the designer of that stuff.
Yeah, when I got there, we were talking about everyone's hair and makeup, and eventually I found out that Mary Louise Parker was very interested in wearing tattoos. And what's interesting is that, we think that the show takes place roughly in the 90s some point. Is that right? I'm forgetting my dates here.
I think so.
Meaning the present day part of it, I think is mid 90s or something.
Yeah.
But and it's very clear when the past is, because they refer to her age and stuff. And they also do a few references to the actual year that it's taking place in. Yeah. So what we wound up doing, though, was sort of messing with time a bit. So you really needed to suspend the disbelief on the timing, because if you think about it, it wasn't as common back in the 90s for anybody really to have tattoos that were so visible, down by the wrist area. I know that for listeners out there, you can't see, but I'm fully tattooed and I have tattooed hands and fingers. And, that wasn't particularly common at all until the past 5 to 10 years. But even before that, you weren't seeing as many people getting full arm tattoos or any like around the wrist as much, unless they could really be covered well by your clothing. So like, a lot of people had upper arms and stuff. So that's why I'm saying, like, I like to think that we sort of messed with the time a little bit, because I'm not so sure that mid 90s would have been the time to do that. But that said, if you forget about the timing, there were reasons that Mary Louise had behind it. Part of it is partially independence. And I don't want to say overcoming trauma, but I do want to say like gaining one's independence from one's past, and maybe not being the obedient person that people want you to be all the time. But as far as Lucy goes, it was interesting because we had a bunch of different ideas. And at one point, somebody said the peanuts, and I was like, huh. And I thought, okay, thinking through the peanuts, I'm the one who came up with the idea of Lucy. And originally, my idea was that I actually wanted her to have an entire wrist, Lucy going all the way around her wrist. And I had actually drawn Lucy on my iPad, and I drew 5 different versions of Lucy, 5 different emotions to show all the different ranges of emotions that were really big in her life, for Mary Louise's character's life, And I really would have loved that idea to have like an entire wrist where you see all the emotions of Lucy around it. We eventually, that was just too much of a tattoo, was kind of too present. So we eventually settled on one emotion, but I let Mary Louise pick which one of those that she really connected to with this character. And offhand, I'm sorry to say I can't remember which character that was right now, but anyway, it was one of the 5 emotions of Lucy, and that's the one we wound up going with.
Yeah, I will say with this production, they did take out little bits age, because in the script it's like, now that I'm 35. So I think they took it out for,
Right.
I read somewhere it's like, so it's really like anybody can play this part at any point. And so I guess time is an illusion, because it is technically a memory play as well. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was just really curious about the tattoos and like her wanting to do tattoos for a little bit and all that stuff. So thank you for chatting with me about it. I feel much better all these, like a year plus later, learning about it.
Well, I just want to say one more thing about that tattoo on the back of the neck, which you couldn't really see. There are only a couple scenes where she like pulls her hair to the side, and she wasn't really facing upstage at the moment, so you wouldn't necessarily have seen it. But we actually, when we were talking about the tattoos, she just connected with that neck tattoo so much that we just decided to keep doing it, even though no one else would see it, because it sort of helps her connect with the character more. And sometimes we do things that people can't see because the actors can see and the actor can connect better. And that's incredibly valid for us. And I was very happy to do it. So we had that as well.
I'm nodding my head so hard nobody could see that because that doesn't come through on a podcast. But I remember I used to do merch at Broadway shows, and one of the shows I worked at was Clybourne Park, and one of the characters had a tribal tattoo, to like a Chinese symbol or something on his arm. And I spoke to him after the show. It's like, it's not mentioned in the show, it's not a thing, but like it's just there on his arm. And so I asked him about it, and he's like, I just felt like this character would have that tattoo. So yes, I mean, even if the audience can't see it or they don't understand, it's definitely something that helps the actor with their performance, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
So what is,
absolutely. No, go ahead. Sorry.
no, continue. We're on a roll with tattoos. Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say that, I'm very much in favor of taking care of the actor in such a way that they never think about the way they look on stage, that they're so I don't want to say happy, because sometimes you want to look unhappy or whatever, but they're so satisfied with what we're creating backstage for them that all they ever have to think about is their performance. And if that tattoo makes her connect better to the character, let's do it. If she wanted 100, I would have done it, something, whatever makes her connect, because, and then you saw that performance. It's so powerful. I mean, I know that she created that role 25, 30 years ago, whatever it was. And, so she was already going to be powerful, but like, just to help her connect even more. Oh, I love requests like that. That's great.
Yeah, and also just seeing her and David Morse together. I mean, the first time I saw the show, I was like, I don't know, this does feel like super creepy because David Morse did age, but I eventually got
Mhm.
like, this isn't as bad. We're good now. And there was one time I saw the show. Well, I mean, it's not on Broadway anymore, so you can just read the script, but the scene where she confronts him about his drinking and he's washing the dishes, there was one time where he actually
Mhm.
hit himself with one of the plates. I was like, oh my God, that's so good. What a moment. So I wanted to ask, like, it's funny because we were talking about like the subtle things too, because even it's just like subtlety of makeup with like Josh Groban, even having just like the red on his like under eyelid just to make him look more like
Mhm.
ominous, if that's the right
Yep.
word. So I think
Mhm.
subtleties with makeup is really great. And I mean, hopefully audiences like don't see the subtleties, but they also do see the subtleties, if that makes sense.
Right. So when they look at the character, they're like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
Like I want them to have like a little, like a minor visceral reaction to the character. It's like, "Ooh," like so you understand him. The moment you see Josh on stage, you sort of start to understand who he is. The red under his eyes implies the man has not slept. He's haunted. He does not sleep. That's there from the moment he gets on that stage. And then it just gets things get bumped up as the show goes on.
Yeah.
But
A
yeah,
lot more
every one of
blood.
those characters is designed. What'd you
Yeah.
say?
I said a lot more blood, for the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
when in doubt, add more blood. So what is the process of actually making a wig? How do you get the hair? How do you create? How does one go about making a wig?
Sure. A wig making is probably exactly what people might think it might be, which maybe they're not thinking about it at all. It's a lot like making a hook rug.
Mm,
So if you've ever seen a hook rug before, where you have a needle and a piece of yarn, well, that needle that you're using is almost the same kind of needle we're using for putting hairs into lace. So the lace is a lot like the hook rug bases, right? Hook rug bases are squares. Our lace has hexagons, which means you can tie hair into any hole in one of 6 different directions,
mhm.
right? So, and the directions matter. Like which way. If you think about a cowlick, the bane of most people's existence, because the hair grows in so many different directions right off that cowlick, right?
Yeah.
And so our lace allows us to create things like that. So
Mhm.
what we do is we first we have to source a bunch of hair. And that's human hair that we usually use. On Broadway, it's almost always human. Occasionally, if there's a reason to use synthetic, we will.
Mhm.
Um, a great example for why we would use synthetic would be South Pacific, the musical, when she has to wash that man right out of her hair.
Yeah.
Washing a wig is one of the worst things you can do to a wig. Like you wash it to keep it clean, but the more you wash it, the less the life is gonna be, the less it's gonna last. Let's put it that way. So what we do in that case is we build them in synthetic and they last much longer. But if we don't have that specific reason, human is better. One, because the actors connect to it better. It feels real to them, because it is real. Two, if I want to change the color, I can change the color, which synthetic, you can't really do that. Um, Three, if I want to curl it quickly with a curling iron, I can do that. And with synthetics, it's not the same process. It takes a longer, it's a very different process. So there's so much more you can do with human. So we source our human hair. Now we have to source it in one of 2 ways. Either you get all straight hair and then you perm it yourself. But personally, I like to source the hair that's already in the texture that I like.
Mhm.
So I'm not physically doing the perming. I have a small studio. Perm is very stinky. It's really stinky and it stinks for a long time. So I don't try to perm anything at my studio. So I buy the hair that's pre-permed already. And then we start building that wig, one hair at a time. It takes anywhere from, for someone who's fast, 24 hours up to maybe 80 hours, and that's for theater. If we're talking about film, the lace is so much finer that you have to go slower, otherwise you'll rip it. It could take anywhere from 100 to 200 hours to build that wig. And therefore, as you can imagine, the film wigs cost twice as much
Yeah.
or more as theatrical wigs cost.
Yeah.
So but we do all that, and when we're building it, we're trying to build in things like a part,
Mhm.
building in a cowlick if necessary. We're taking into consideration, like, um did this person have roots, in their hair? Is it growing? Is it blonde with it has brown roots or something? So there's a lot that goes into building that wig. I say it takes 24 to 60 hours or 80 hours to build one wig, but then we have to color it and cut it and style it. So the full process is easily 100 to 200 hours per wig
Oh
just
my,
to get it ready for the first fitting. For the
yeah.
first fitting.
Yeah, well, I definitely now have a new appreciation for wigs in shows. So when I
Yeah.
was on your Instagram, I noticed that one of the wigs had diamonds with different numbers around it and different locations. Or am I just like,
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. That.
is that how one builds a wig based on texture, certain parts of the hair? Can you just explain what that is?
Sure. So on that block that I talked about earlier,
Mhm.
when I have the duplicate of their head, I will sometimes draw patterns on that block. Those patterns are for where different hair colors go.
Okay.
So if I want to have someone who's like a very natural looking blonde, I can't use one shade of blonde. I'm going to have to use 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different shades of blonde hair. That wig you're talking about was a redhead. It was in Jagged Little Pill. And I wanted it to be very multi-tonal red. So I had I think it was 3 different colors on that one. Um, 3 different shades of red, and I put them into these diamond shapes so that when you start brushing through it, it starts looking a little streaky when you first done it, but once you styled it, it
Yeah.
looks like a series of highlights have been
Mhm.
put through the whole wig, and I don't have to color it after the fact. The only thing I had to do with that wig after the fact was add in a little bit of a root to make it a little bit darker at the root, so there was more depth going from tip to root. Otherwise, the wig came out beautifully. It was for Janine DeVita in Jagged Little Pill on Broadway.
I love Janine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I worked with her during the pandemic a couple of times, and she's just like the coolest, nicest, loveliest human. And I know that you met her too, so I'm sure you
Oh
feel
yeah,
how great she is.
and she just had a baby. She just had
I
a baby
know.
too.
I know. Well, I during the pandemic, I did these virtual readings and we did 2 cabarets. And the second cabaret, I emailed her. I'm like, do you want to do this? She's like, well, I'm gonna be on my couch pregnant, so I don't think it's a good idea. And I was just so excited for her. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah,
Janine, that's amazing.
yeah,
So yeah, and her kid is so
yeah.
cute. So
I
cute.
know, right? I every time I look at one of her posts, I'm like, oh my goodness, such a pretty little baby. That's great.
Cute,
So
cute ass little baby.
I'm happy for her. She's a lovely person.
She's
Yeah,
wonderful. Just truly, truly wonderful. It's like a Janine DeVita like podcast fan account now. So how do you
yeah.
decide who decides who gets a wig and who doesn't get a wig? And for those who don't get a wig, how does it go about styling their own hair for a show?
Oftentimes a script dictates who gets wigs.
Okay.
If we know that we're going through, let's say, 5 years in
Hmm.
a script, um, you can't change somebody's hairstyle quickly enough to show
Yeah.
progression of time.
Hmm.
So that automatically dictates that we're going to have wigs. And just FYI, the way I like to put this is once in a wig, always in a wig. So if you need one wig for the show, then you're going to need wigs for the rest of the show as well. We're not going to try to prep your hair, get it inside underneath a wig, take the wig off and expect that hair underneath to look good.
Yeah.
You know, so in fact, oftentimes what we'll do is if we want to, let's say, use a person's own hair for half the show and then a wig for the other half, what we'll often do is create a wig that looks just like their hair so that they can be in wigs the entire time. And the reason for that is that not only is it just easier for the backstage crew and the amount of time you get for changes, but also there's no damage in to their hair if we're styling a wig. But if
Yeah.
we need to style their own hair, it's potentially damaging when you're doing 8 shows a week. You're applying heat possibly that you would never normally apply.
Mhm.
There's only so much we can do to prevent the damage. And after a while, it's just going to be like, yeah, your hair gets damaged. So we try to wig people as often as possible for that reason. But sometimes you have a show where someone's own hair is perfect and the actor just insists, absolutely says, absolutely not. I must have a wig because I do not want the damage to my own hair.
Mhm.
In which case then, assuming the producers are on board with it, we just go with that, even if we're just duplicating their hair for that part.
Yeah.
Um, a great example of where people don't often get wigs are like a lot of the male presenting characters on stage don't always get wigs unless we're talking about a period piece or there's something specific in the script, like they need to have a mullet, for example. But otherwise, we'll try to use their hair as often as possible. And there's not as much with short hair. There isn't as much damage because you're not usually using heat to style such short hair. It's like a little bit of product, hairspray, brush it, go kind of thing. So in that case, we don't always use wigs if we don't have to. But it's usually script dictated, sometimes actor dictated. Yeah, and then obviously the director and the costume designer have an opinion as well. But I always let them know from the beginning. My opinion is wig people as often as possible to prevent the damage to their own hair, because I don't want anyone's hair getting damaged.
Yeah. Speaking of doing people's hair, your studio also offers haircuts as well, right? You can go to, yeah. So
Yeah.
do you want to talk a little bit more about your studio and what other fun things that you guys do? Because you have the traveling barber as well. So what other things does Backstage Artistry do?
Well, for Backstage Artistry originally started as just two of us, me and my former business partner, Rob Green, and we wanted to be able to offer hair and makeup services in the entertainment industry, meaning in TV, film, or theater. And we wanted to be able to work as a team. And so when we first started it, Rob, my ex-business partner, joined the union as a hairstylist, and I joined the union as a makeup artist. So this way, in TV film, you can only work on one craft. You can hair or makeup, you cannot do both. So this way, our Backstage Artistry could do both, right? Because we as a business offered both, and we were in two different parts of the union. And in theater, you can do both, by the way. It doesn't matter which part you're in. Yeah. But then eventually, Rob wanted to leave, and he actually wanted to work exclusively in TV film. He didn't want to do the theater part. And I am such a theater person that I prefer working in theater over TV film. And so after he left, suddenly it seemed like our business model was just totally different. And so over time, I've just figured out ways that we could still kind of go back to that same business model. So I switched in the union from doing makeup to hair, which I'm allowed to switch one time. So now I'm on the hair side of the union instead of the wig side, the makeup side, excuse me. And I have other people who work with me who are on the makeup side. So if we want to do TV film, we could still service it as a company. And then I just decided, like, what are the other services that make complete sense to add to this? Well, we offer barbering services because the one thing that we have to take care of on Broadway, for example, if we're using an actor's own hair, well, we have to maintain their own hair. So if we're doing, let's say, for example, an actress is using her own hair and needs it to be colored, well, then what we do is we usually send them out to a salon to be colored, because most theaters are not equipped backstage to offer salon services like color that require ventilation, Yeah. So we send them to a salon. But what about all the haircuts then that they also need? We can certainly service the haircuts. Well, most of the supervisors that work in our industry backstage are hairstylists who are cosmetologists who can cut hair, but there aren't as many barbers in our industry. And so one of the things I did during the pandemic, I was like, actually, I think I should actually go to barber school. I was never a barber. I've always been a hairstylist. So I decided to go to barber school so that I could then expand the business just a little bit more to offering that service as well to guys who need fades, designs cut in, or whatever. So that's why we offer barbering services as well. As you said, aside from makeup, we also do a lot of temporary tattoos that we do for TV, film, and theater. We also will do a bunch of FX makeup, prosthetics and stuff. We're not a prosthetics house. I have friends who do that, and when I need some really impressive prosthetics, I go to them and we hire them, and that's great. But there's a lot of prosthetics that we can build in-house that don't require the same types of equipment that, say, you would need on a horror film where you need very much more specific equipment. So we did a show one time where it was called The Amateurs at the Vineyard, where someone was dying of the bubonic plague and needed to have buboes under their armpits. So I made these prosthetics in my studio, and then I had to bring them home to put them in my freezer, just kind of let them hang out there. And I had a freezer full of prosthetics for the entire run of that show. But yeah, so we offer those services as well. I think that's pretty much all the services we offer. Oh, sorry, I'm lying to you. I'm absolutely lying to you, because during the pandemic, when nobody was working, I decided, and everyone was sort of pivoting. I decided after right before I started barber school, I decided to offer wig making classes as well at my studio. There's a lot of people in our industry who are hairstylists and makeup artists who are not wig makers. In fact, most are not wig makers at all. But so many of them would like to learn how so
Yeah.
that they have that bit of extra knowledge. Knowledge is power, right? So I offered wig making school classes to a lot of people during the pandemic, and that was a lot of fun, mostly because it was the first time people were able to get back together again in a room and talk. Granted, we were masked, we were as far apart in the room as we possibly could be, but I had to go work individually one-on-one with every single student. So the two of us, like, whenever I was working one-on-one, we were within a half an inch of each other. But we tried to stay as masked as possible and kept the ventilation going and all that stuff. But that was really wonderful. And out of that, I wound up creating a bunch of other classes, not just wig making, but also for in TV and film, facial hair is considered part of the makeup side, not the hair side. So I taught facial hair building, mustache making for our makeup brothers and sisters in the union. And then I also offered wig styling classes for people who are used to doing so much with people's own hair, but not actually styling wigs. So we had a great time. It was like a 6-hour class, and it was everybody styled so many wigs during that class. It was great. And then I would also do basic wig. What did I call it? A basic wig course, which was offered to people who really knew nothing about wigs, like people in our industry, as well as lay people who just wanted to learn about what is a lace front wig, how do you protect it, how do you store it, how do you style it, and then how do you put it on, how do you prep somebody's hair to put that on, and how do you make the lace disappear and all that stuff, and then where do you get supplies for that, so I put together a syllabus for all of those classes and offered a bunch of them during the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, I just got so busy with designing again that I haven't been able to offer them again. But one day I would love to offer some more wig making classes, because it was really a great way for me to meet so many people. It was so wonderful to meet so many makeup artists and hairstylists in our union, as well as people from outside of the union that otherwise I don't know that I would have ever had the chance to meet.
Yeah. Do you also do medical wigs for people?
I used to do that a lot. And it's an interesting, no, it's a difficult situation for obviously the patient, and you want to give them all the time in the world to do exactly what they need. And I always found it difficult to charge them for it. So what I would do is I would charge them for the materials alone, but not the labor. Like, this way, pay for the physical hair, pay for the lace, but that's it. And then everything else we would just cover. But the reason it's hard for me to offer it these days is because I have so many contracts that have very specific timelines that when I had a medical client who needed a wig, I couldn't always meet their timeline of when, like, we knew when they were about to start losing their hair, usually after, say, second treatment, which is like 2 or 3 weeks after the first treatment, or possibly just a week after the first treatment. So we knew when the hair loss was going to start, and you really wanted to time it right for that hair loss time. And I found it more and more difficult to start meeting those deadlines, because while I obviously want to, from a personal standpoint, I have these professional contracts that I've signed that say I will have these wigs done by this date. So it was very difficult to meet both. So eventually I had to stop. And now every time I get someone who or someone who's referred to me as a medical client, what I do is I refer them to someone else who does that specifically, so that I know they can be taken care of, because I don't feel like I can take care of them the way that I really need to.
Yeah. I just had another question that came to me. So if a show is running for a period of time, is there a decision made to change a wig style or a wig color, what have you, or even makeup while the show is running?
I think from day one, of, let's say, the first performance, the first preview, things are slowly changing every single day, right? It's never exactly the same thing. It's not like you have an X marks the spot and you can just put your finger on that X, right? It's hair. So hair is always a little bit different every day. And then you have a crew of people backstage whose hands are different from yours, right? So when they start working on the wigs, they're going to automatically look different from the way I designed them. And as it goes along, they start to change. So we have a wig Bible that they can refer back to, and they should refer back to it occasionally. So they're like, oh, right, it actually should look like this. But as far as like actual, like, changes that purposeful changes happening to things. It occasionally happens if some weird anomaly occurs later on in the show that had never happened before, and you're like, oh, we got to take care of this and make sure this never happens again. But it usually occurs more often when a cast change happens, when somebody new goes into the role, and let's say the shade of blonde that's currently on Maria Bilbao as Joanna in Sweeney Todd will not be appropriate for the next person who goes in as Joanna, right? Or we have swings, like understudy Joannas, who definitely need a different blonde color. So we do change colors. It's usually around a cast person. Makeup doesn't usually change as much, again, until the cast change happens, right? That all sort of stays the same for the most part. I guess it's like most aspects of the show, right? Like, a costume doesn't really change unless something disastrous happens suddenly, like 4 months in, and you're like, oh, now we've seen something that we've never seen. But otherwise, not really. They don't change that much until a cast change happens.
Yeah. Do you have any dream projects that you would love to design for, or even just consult for?
I do. Well, let me tell you first what I always think about what the dream gig is. It's what I like to call the trifecta. It's the it's the show you get offered that's the pre-Broadway show that goes to Broadway and then goes on its national tour, and then possibly even goes beyond to an international tour. And I fortunately have had the chance to do 3 of them of my own design. I did Porgy and Bess, and then I did Jagged Little Pill, which is on tour now, and now we have Kimberly Akimbo, which we now has been announced for touring next year.
Yeah.
And in some sense, Juliet is sort of similar, although I did not do the original production in London. That was done by someone who unfortunately passed away during the pandemic. So I wound up being offered the job here. So I want to do more shows that are the trifecta, so to say. But as far as actual projects go, what I would love to do is I would love the next time we get a very full-scale production of Into the Woods on Broadway, I really want to design that one. It is my favorite musical, and I've designed it, but never with the full-scale Broadway budget, Broadway timeline. And even this most recent revival, which was designed by my friend Cookie Jordan, that was an encores production. So that's a very different type of show to transfer from encores to Broadway. It's very different from one that originates on Broadway. So that is like a big dream project of mine that I'd love to do on Broadway sometime. That's the one I can think of offhand.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite theater going experiences?
Oh, I do, and they've always been as audience members.
Well, that's fine. That's what I'm looking for. So.
Yeah, there are some shows that just did not last that were so brilliant. And when I went to see them, I knew nothing about them. And I'll give you the examples. The first one I can think of was Coram Boy. Did you see that?
I didn't, but I've heard like all of the people who saw it were just obsessed with it. But I hear it was incredible.
So I got discount tickets on TDF. I think they were like $37. And I said to my best friend, I said, Jay, I don't know what this is. I said, I was working in London 6 months ago, and I saw this name Coram Boy on a theater. Don't know what the heck it means. I said, but for $37, let's go see it. We got, I don't know if it was second or third row, which was amazing, by the way. And at intermission, we turned to each other, mouths agape, and we're like, what the hell did we just see? This is the most brilliant piece of theater I have seen in years. And nobody knows what the show is. The name Coram Boy means nothing to anybody. We don't understand the names. And the marketing just did not define what this was. And it was a shame, because truly one of the most brilliant stagings I'd ever seen, and such a brilliant show. And the other one that was like that for me was Scottsboro Boys. First of all, you have the names Candor and Ebb attached. You have the name Susan Stroman attached. You think it's going to be a hit, right? You know nothing about what the name Scottsboro Boys means unless you happen to know that history, which perhaps I should have. But when I saw the show, and I remember they had a stage full of, what was it, like 10 or 12 chairs, and they used those chairs to create set pieces and stuff. And I was like, and I remember turning to my friend who I was with in that show saying, this is what theater is all about. It is making the magic before your eyes, but it's telling the story, and it doesn't have to be the mega overproduced show that is the biggest crowd pleaser because the lights are shining at you and the confetti's coming. It doesn't have to be that. It's just really amazing and really beautiful casting. And when I remember when that show, I was watching its weekly numbers, and I remember thinking, this is going to close so soon. I went on this own personal mission of telling everyone I knew, go see Scottsboro Boys, go see the show. You have to see this show. And everybody who saw it just loved it. And I was like, this is unlike the other Cantor and Ebb shows you've ever seen. And yet it's not unlike the other Cantor and Ebb shows you've seen. It's just that the staging was so very different from the other ones. It was so brilliant. And it really showed you the power of Cantor and Ebb and the power of this story and the power of Susan Stroman's brilliant direction. I mean, so I have had those two, I call them transformative theatrical theater going experiences in my life, and I'll never forget them. You know, I still talk about them even now to you, but to this day to people, whenever they ask me, I have that answer ready. I know exactly what was some of the best theater I've ever seen.
Well, definitely you can tell how much it means to you because of all of the passion that you can hear and see coming from you just talking about these shows. And that's what's so great about theaters, because you can find these like certain shows that you've seen that are just like core shaking to you. And you know, I was telling people I was also just in London like a week ago. I wish I was still there. But I'm still waiting to see like a show that's going to shake me to my core. Like the last show to do that for me was The Ferryman. And I'm not saying things that I haven't seen haven't been incredible. Like I saw really great stuff in London, and I saw a fantastic play a couple of months ago, The Coast Starlight, which I still am talking to people about. I'm like, if I knew how good that show was, I wish I would have seen it sooner than like the last performance that I saw. But yeah, that's just what's so great about theater is just the effect that it has on certain people and the shows. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So let's do some inside the actor studio questions. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay. What is your favorite word?
My favorite, just word, not favorite curse word. This
Oh, that's
this is
coming.
what I
There's
always
10 questions. So there's a couple. So what's your favorite word?
oh my gosh. This one's put me on the spot because I don't know that I have a favorite word, but
It's okay if you don't.
um, I would say, you know what my favorite word is, and I say this all the time. As a very out and proud gay man, and so when people say, people say the word clearly, like, I misunderstood. Oh, clearly. My favorite thing to say is queerly. So I'd say that's the one I probably say most often.
Happy Pride. Happy Pride,
Yeah,
everyone.
exactly.
Clearly. What is your least favorite word?
um, I'm gonna put this in relation to work, because I don't know that I have a least favorite word in general, but I would say in terms of work, it's can't. I am so tired of hearing people say, we can't, or I can't do this. And I'm just like, then you're not thinking very hard. There is something we can do. But I've heard that way too often, especially lately, post pandemic. Well, we can't do this. Yes, well, we can actually, we'll figure it out. So I'd say can't is my least, professionally speaking.
Okay. What turns you on?
Ama
I'm
What
sorry.
turns me on, hold on, I'm thinking, what turns me on, uh, professionally, especially, but in general, is collaboration. I am most excited. You heard me speaking excitedly about those two shows. That's because that beautiful collaboration amongst all those artists showed. And collaboration turns me on like nobody's business.
What turns you off?
Oh God. Uh, Plenty of things. The first thing is bad behavior. And that can mean whatever you want it to mean. I'm not going to tell you what it means to me, but I will say that in our industry for years, bad behavior was rewarded far too often. Just because someone is a good designer doesn't make them a good human being, right? So I'd say bad behavior is the biggest turnoff for me. I would also say when somebody's own personal attitude dictates the temperature in a room, that turns me off completely as well. Even if it defines the temperature in a positive way, I'm like, I don't like when any one person has that sort of effect over an entire room.
Yeah. All right. Now for your favorite question. What is
Uh-huh.
your favorite curse word?
Cunt.
Beautiful.
Yep. No explanation needed. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, we don't need an explanation. That's fine.
Yep.
What sound or noise do you
Do I what?
love?
Um, I love the sound of my cat meowing. I have a 19 and a half year old deaf cat
Oh, wow.
who now meows so loudly because he doesn't realize he's doing it. And while sometimes it can be annoying, overall, I just love it because it means I have more time with my 19 and a half year old cat. I love that sound. Um, and I love the sound of birds. Something about it just calms me down so much. And New York City, we don't get that sound.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that sound as well.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, I hate the sound of people chewing. I cannot listen to people masticating. It's so disgusting to me.
So going out to eat with people must be a challenge then.
No, because usually restaurants, it's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
It's when it's silent, like if there's two of you eating in a room and there's no noise and you hear that, I'm not going to demonstrate the sound, but you know what I'm talking about.
Got that.
Where, exactly
I did
that
it for
sound.
you.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, so gross. I don't want to hear it.
What profession other than yours would you like to attempt?
Oh, easily. I got this one. In fact, during the pandemic, I started studying it, which is funny. Forensic science. I've already been a mathematician.
Yeah.
I'm a wig, hair, and makeup designer now. So if I have to have another career, what I would love to do is study forensic science even more. And during the pandemic, the first thing I did when everybody started panicking about what they were going to do and how they're going to make money, and everyone's trying to figure out how to pivot. And I thought, should I pivot? I'm like, what I really want to do right now, do I want to do something for my work? No, I want to do things that my work has prevented me from doing right now. And so the first thing I did was I did a 2-month online course in forensic science. And it was so amazing. I had such a blast doing it because we actually got to solve crimes based on forensic evidence for real crimes. So we already knew what happened. Well, they knew what happened. The people who put it together knew what happened. The evidence was there. So we had to figure out what did that evidence mean. And it was really cool. So that's what I would do next if I had to do another one.
What profession would you not like to do?
Stage manager. I think it takes the type of person that I am just not. It takes somebody who is just super patient, which everyone always says patience is a virtue, and I always just say not one of mine. I'm truly, even though I'm from Chicago, I'm truly more of a New Yorker. I just don't have that patience in me. I have that. I believe in a sense of urgency for some reason. For some reason, that's just how I am. And patience it eludes me. And I think that stage managers are some of the most patient people I have ever met. And I could not do that job.
Yeah. And finally, as James Lipson used to say, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I'd like him to say, thank you for being nice to people. I mentioned bad behavior should not be rewarded. And that's a lot of it. It's that just people, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. It's okay to get frustrated. You can do it in a nice way. It's okay to be angry with someone, and you can remove yourself from a situation before you are not nice to them. It's not expensive or hard to be nice. And I just want people to be nice to me. And I try to be nice to everybody. So I think that's what I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that, doing this podcast for however long I've done it and whomever I've interviewed, when that topic kind of comes up, it's always like, be nice to people. People will remember you for your kindness and your hard work and not being an asshole. So I think that's important, especially in this industry.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, Jared, before we end, is there anything you want to add? Any life advice, comments, questions, singing, dancing? I don't know. Do you got anything?
You know what I do want to say first is I do want all the listeners to know that I had a technological difficulty that made me late to this interview. And not only do I apologize to that, But I also want to thank you for being so patient with me, which is something I don't have, patience. I want to thank you for being so patient with me and still allowing me to come back
Of
to meet with you,
course.
because this has been a lot of fun. So that's what I really want the listeners to know, is just how patient you are and how very kind and nice you are.
I try, although I am like a total typical New Yorker. So when I'm actually like doing my real job, I'm like, I don't have patience for this. And when I'm walking on the sidewalk and people are in the way, I don't have patience for that. But I think patience is a virtue. And I've told people this too, especially like with my podcast. Like I've had some guests on that I've had to like wait to reach out to again before they came on. So I think that's definitely a thing. And also like having patience to find out about the tattoos and how I learned to drive. Like, look
Yes,
how that worked
yes,
out. Well,
yep,
Frankie, thank you
exactly.
so much for coming on. You can stay on after I end the recording, but thank
Okay.
you so much for coming on and greatly appreciated. And it was just really nice to hear about like the other aspect of the industry when it comes to doing hair and makeup and wigs and all of that, because that's something you don't really hear about every day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me on here. I really
Yes,
appreciate it.
of course, anytime. All right, thanks for those listening. And